Yeah, we're away. Okay, so I'll I'll just start us off with prayer, and we will go from there. So people will be coming in as we go along. So yeah, the responses here are prayer. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, who are so precious in your eyes.
Hear our prayer.
God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love for all the creatures of this earth.
Hear our prayer.
God of mercy, may we receive your forgiveness and convey your mercy throughout our common home. Hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
We ask this in the name of Jesus and in the power of your Spirit, where we live now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
And Pat's now going to take over.
Thank you. So I'm Pat Gaffney, and I am on the board of the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative and part of the group who has put resources together for these Catholic Nonviolence Days of Action. And it's really good that a number of you who are online here tonight have contributed to earlier webinars that we've done on nonviolence. So Katrina contributed to something on religious life and nonviolence. Patricia gave, I remember, one of her own presentations about what drew her to nonviolence. We've got Mary Cook on board, who helped us this year with the resources for the Catholic Days of Nonviolence. So it's great that this is an evolving project. It's not something that's static. So I thought it might be just helpful, without being too heavy about it, to just do a kind of recap or an up-to-date on where we are with the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. And I just started with this, just as a kind of scene setter, just to remind us that when we're talking about nonviolence, we're talking about addressing a whole host of violence and injustice in our world today. Violence and injustice are multifaceted. So non-violence and non-violent, our approach to violence and injustice has to be multifaceted as well. So, in our CNI work, we see 4 strands of that weave together. They influence one another, they nurture one another. So it's a kind of spirituality. Those of you who are involved in active peace work, you know that it demands a huge amount of courage and personal resolve and drawing on your own reserves. There's an element of courage needed there. It demands an empathy, being able to stand with or stand beside or stand in another's shoes. It requires solidarity, whether that's with our earth and what's being done to the earth, or with one another, solidarity with one another. And it requires putting ourselves in a position where we're ready to change, ready to be transformed. So it's about that aspect of our life, our spiritual life, both as individuals but as communities. It's also a way of life. It's not just a one-off approach, a one-off thing that we do. So the approaches that we take, the practices that we're involved in, the way we communicate with one another, the way we live together, whether we're inclusive of one another in the choices that we make, in the issues that we're a part of. So our economic, our social, our political choices, our religious choices, how do we reflect our concern for violence and our desire to find non-violent approaches as part of that? It's an ethic and it's a teaching that is developing in the church all the time. It's where we try and find in our ethics that place where we get the relationships with one another right, the relationships with the earth. And increasingly, we're called to put this ethic at the center of our lives, at the way we make our decisions and choices, to make it a priority in the way we understand our faith and what guides our faith. And it's a way to bring about change. And there's a whole host of skills and tools and approaches that we draw upon. There's advocacy, there's dialogue, there's protest, there's persuasion, there's education, all the things that we do to try to prevent and end violence, all the things that we do that try to create win-win situations in times of conflict or violence or injustice, so that both parties are changed, so that the transformation that comes about is long-lasting. So that's just by way of a kind of scene setter. And whether we're talking about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, or whether we're talking about our responses to climate injustice, or to the rights of indigenous people, or challenging the arms trade, all these things will be in place if we're trying to really live out an active non-violent approach to what's going on in our world. Thanks, Andrew. And there are just three kind of key things that we have been involved in recent months that I just wanted to highlight. The first one is the whole issue of synodality, and Pax Christi International and CNI have been very closely involved in this whole process for the synod. And I think the reason we're close is because we see the process of synodality is really a process of non-violence if it's carried out in its best way. It's about engagement, it's about listening, it's about dialogue, it's about inclusion, it's about trying to involve people in decision making. So as a movement, Pax Christi organised 10 or 11 sessions in the run-up to the preparation for the synod, international gatherings that brought people together to reflect on what does the church need to do to make non-violence more central in its life? What kind of resources and education and catechesis do we need to make that more central? And luckily, we have formed a very close and good working relationship with Sister Natalie, who's heading up the synod work, and one of our exec members on the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, a Japanese religious, Sister Philo, is actually on the preparatory committee for the synod that will begin in October, the only woman on the preparatory committee for the synod. So we're trying to engage and bring all the work that we've done and the experiences into that synod process. The next level is obviously what's been happening with Ukraine and Russia. And very faithfully, people within the CNI network have been trying to articulate and write about and offer to groups in the region a just peace approach to the conflict that's there in that region, a just peace approach that's trying to build peace, develop and support civil society, that's trying to create opportunities for dialogue and reconciliation, that's supporting those who are resisting war in both Russia, Germany, and Belarus, that's trying to offer a parallel alternative to what might be happening in Ukraine and Russia. And as part of that, 5 members of the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative took part in an interfaith pilgrimage to Kiev last year. And they saw that as one of the ways of trying to hold space for peace through interfaith dialogue, that happened to be, holding space for peace, where, you know, all around things might be falling apart, but we know that there are spaces in faith circles, in civil society circles, in peace circles, where people are desperately holding a different value, trying to create different choices, look for different decisions that could be made. And taking part in delegations and encounters with others is part of that holding space. And that's a very clear non-violent action. And the third one is CNI's involvement in the days that we're remembering now, the season of creation, part of the Laudato Si network, engaging increasingly with communities who are experiencing climate injustice, who are experiencing the injustice of the extractive industries, especially indigenous communities, and working with the Laudato Si network and others to reflect the role of nonviolent activism and the place of nonviolent activism in engaging with climate change and engaging with climate justice. And I think it was a lot of the work that went into this new liturgical resource that has been created for this season of creation involved people in our Catholic Nonviolence Initiative network. So, you know, joining up the connections, interfaith, solidarity with Indigenous, working on climate issues, working in conflict areas, are all part of the framework that we've been operating on over the last year or so. And then just very quickly, the second bit of the scene setting will lead us into our reflection in a moment. In December, we held a gathering that we called an encounter that we held in Rome in December 2023. And the purpose of this was to bring together, I think we had 70 delegates from 28 countries who were reflecting grassroots activism for nonviolence. And the result of, the focus of that conference was to kind of follow a thread of peacemaking in the Catholic Church. That thread started with the Pacem in Terris and the anniversary of Pacem in Terris, the 40-year anniversary. It followed through to Pope Francis and the work that he's done through Fratelli Tutti and Laudato Si, and brought us right up to Francis's engagement and the words and the witness that he makes that really uphold non-violence as a way forward in bringing about change. So that gathering was, as I say, we called it an encounter rather than a conference because it was extremely participatory. And we had at that a number of leaders from the Pax Christi family, bishops and leaders from other countries. Unfortunately, Bishop Malcolm couldn't be there. But one of the delegates was Archbishop John Wester from the USA. And it was a transformative experience for him, which caused him to say this: I'm learning from the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative that the Church has to model and catechize how we respond to violence non-violently. The impact of this is incredible, it's tremendous. And some of you will know that Archbishop Wester issued a very strong pastoral letter from his Diocese of Santa Fe early in the year against nuclear war preparations and the work that goes on in America and globally. And he and colleagues from America recently took part in an interfaith delegation that went to Hiroshima, went to Nagasaki, went to Tokyo, partly as a pilgrimage of repentance and a pilgrimage to build bridges with the people of Japan, but also to reaffirm the Church's commitment to nuclear disarmament as a core part of active nonviolence. So that brings us up to where we are at the moment. And many of you will know that at the beginning of our history in CNI, we were aiming to have a new teaching, an encyclical. And while we're still, in a way, looking to develop that, I think we feel very much that, you know, our common desire to work for justice and to care for the earth and to end violence, we realize that we, the people, in a way, by our actions, by what we do in Pax Christi, by what we do in CNI, we're actually writing that encyclical by our activities, by our witness. And Pope Francis has been, I believe personally, and I think CNI, an amazing witness for nonviolence. He has a huge amount to teach us. about where to be and how to be, and how that reflects a deep spirituality and practice and way of life. And so we're going to have a look at that in just a moment. But before we do that, Valerie is just going to introduce something for you to think about.
So we're going to divide into groups shortly so that we can all have a say. I think, Andrew, we can move to the next slide.
Yes, I'm just attempting that. It will come.
So, as Pat said, following Pope Francis over these years has been so impressive. And she and a colleague from CNI have put together what amounts to really quite an impressive array of episodes and occasions when Pope Francis has been a model of non-violence in one way or another. So we thought we'd focus on this for our discussion, and to give you due warning of what to look out for in this presentation, here are 3 questions which we thought we could look at in the groups. So first of all, when you look at this, think about what you make of the dramatic and symbolic actions of Pope Francis. What do you think they tell us about the bigger story of gospel non-violence? And thirdly, can we be better at sharing this, and how? So what do you make of it? What do you make of the dramatic and symbolic actions of Pope Francis? What do you think they tell us about the bigger story of gospel non-violence? And can we be, and how can we be better at sharing this? So I think Aisling's going to divide us into small groups, and we will have about 20 minutes to look at these questions, 1, 2, or 3, or all of them. And we would ask each group to be ready for 1 or more of you to give some feedback when we've finished the 20-minute discussion. Thank you.
Right. I'm now going to share the screen and try and get this video working. So it'll just take me a moment.
Right, so just to recap, before we divide into groups, the 3 areas we'd like you to think and discuss about are: what do you make of the dramatic and symbolic actions of Pope Francis? What do you think they tell us about the bigger story of gospel nonviolence? And can we be better at sharing this? 20 minutes and a feedback opportunity at the end of that.
Are we all back now? I hope you all had good conversations. Aisling commented that people were slow coming back. So hopefully that means there were good conversations. So a couple of minutes per group, for the 5 groups, for the insights from your chat to share with us, please. So particularly, I think the dramatic symbolic actions of Pope Francis, how those went down with people, what they tell us about the bigger story of gospel nonviolence, but particularly how we can be better at sharing this. So group 1, who was, I can't remember now what group I was in, but so I hope you can. Somebody from group 1?
I think that was Katrina, Owen, Teresa and Andrew, just to put you all on the spot.
That's very good. Yeah, I was going to ask Katrina whether she would be.
Yeah, I'm happy to share, and if people can add if I forget things. Yeah, in terms of the dramatic symbolic impact, I think we were all just overwhelmed by the quantity and the diversity and breadth of encounter in very diverse situations, but all very difficult situations. And the range from being with just 2 small children, very lowly, humble image, to then speaking to the US Congress and meeting world leaders. And someone said very powerfully, how much courage it takes to put ourselves in these situations. And they weren't all images of people coming to the Vatican. It was very much Pope Francis going out and putting himself into these very challenging, at times very challenging situations. But just how authentic it was too. It wasn't like a politician's photo opportunity kissing a baby. There was something really authentic about his encounter with people. And we were very much touched by some of the quotes too, about how this is so central to our own conversion process, that this is a lifelong journey that we're all going on. And then when we were reflecting on how this relates to gospel nonviolence, I think we were just really struck how so many of the images were very similar to gospel stories of Jesus going out onto the margins and being physically present with those on the edge. And how someone spoke very powerfully, I think it was Owen, who said, it takes us right to the heart of the gospel. It takes us to the passion of Jesus, where that ultimate violence of the cross, Jesus embodies non-violence. He doesn't retaliate. He doesn't call down the legions of angels to bring vengeance, but accepts that, and it's that modelling that's at the heart of the gospel. In terms of how we share this, I think we talked about how we model it with our own lives, how we can't expect people to come to us. Maybe we need to get out more into groups that already exist, places that already exist, to share evenings like this. And we just thought the film itself would be a great resource to begin that with people. Have I forgotten anything? Does anybody want to add anything?
Thank you, Katrina. Should we have somebody from group 2? And I think that even if people, you're making the same points that people have said before, that's okay, because it just reinforces how important that point or that image or whatever is. So group 2. Aisling will name you and shame you if nobody volunteers.
I think that was us. Should I do it? But and as Katrina said, add in things. Very much what Group 1 said about the range and breadth of this 10-year journey, really, and how on earth has he managed to keep going and sustain himself as an older man. Also that a lot of his work is with marginalized people, or people who are seen as bad, criminals, well, literally criminals in prisons, and then refugees, and First Nation people. So that seems to be his focus, as well as speaking truth to power. It's an example of leadership, very much so, practical leadership, and a witness. He asks forgiveness, instead of not just giving forgiveness, but he asks it for himself and the church, as in the First Nation people. Right. It's also it's quite hard to keep hope. That was another point that came up. But somehow, especially given the announcement yesterday from Rishi Sunak, if we're thinking about climate, but maybe there are some signs of hope in the number of people who are on board. But the problem is we don't hear enough preaching, explicit preaching from the pulpit on non-violence. Not enough people are getting on board within the Catholic Church. And there's violence in the destruction of the environment. But there are some signs of hope. I know our parish is going for Live Simply Award. Okay, let me share it better. Oh, and also hope in the arms fair recently in London. That was another sign of hope, and the variety of Christian people there, all religions there, and others of no religion. Was there anything else?
Thanks, Sheila. So, some new ideas, some reinforcing of the things that have already been mentioned. So, group 3.
I think I'm going to do this, but I'm going to be invisible because my camera is playing up and I can't actually make it work properly. So I shall be invisible, but I can talk. We actually were struck by the film or video, which we thought was a superb compilation, really inspiring, of prophetic leadership. And this notion of the need for the church to have a prophetic presence in difficult situations and challenging places, that it's an example of how you lead by example. Not that what the Pope does is always successful, but that being with people in difficult situations is the prophetic act, if you like. And we thought that it would be good if more of our bishops did this, but also if we found opportunities to do it, because we talked quite a lot about the difficulty of getting the secular press in particular, and sometimes even the religious press, to take any notice of actions for justice and peace and non-violence. Something like the campaign at the arms fair, you get a lot of people blocking streets, peacefully protesting, and it gets no attention in the media at all. So there is a problem, and we need to work harder, I think, at when we do something, to think about how we can share what we've done more widely, and particularly use the resources of people like Ellen, who can get things into the press. Take photographs, because a photograph will often find its way, if it's a good photograph, into the media, whereas text won't. So get your cameras out, and take some photographs. And we talked quite a lot too about the need for persistence. That just because you do something and it fails, that's not a reason to stop doing it. And Pope Francis leads in that way too, and that he will go to Sudan and he will kiss the feet of the leaders, and they go on fighting. But they also know that there is a possibility of peace that they might pursue. Perhaps every time, perhaps they lie awake at night and think of that. I don't know. It's not possible to know. Anyway, if somebody else wants to add something to that, please do. But yes, we would very, very much like that video to be available, to share with justice and peace groups and commissions and parishes, because it's brilliant.
Thank you, Patricia. Group 4. Anybody from Group 4? Let's go on to Group 5 then, see if there's anyone there. We'll come back to Group 4. If your group hasn't said anything yet, then you may be Group 4 or Group 5.
Yeah, I know I'm Group 5. I was just hoping somebody else would step up, because I wasn't taking comprehensive notes, unfortunately. We were astounded really by the range of examples of Pope Francis's actions that came up in the video, because it's been over a long period of time and there were things that we'd forgotten about. That was just really quite staggering. We noted very particularly contact with people on the margins in various ways, and meeting with people of other faiths, which we thought was particularly impressive. We did note that it provided quite a few good photo opportunities, which helped to get the message out in the press and the media. We noted that a lot of what he was doing reflected what Jesus did in the gospel stories, and the fact that he would meet anybody, and the element of forgiveness. particularly not taking sides, even where one might think that one side was in the right and one was in the wrong. He's very careful not to take sides, to keep the opportunity for dialogue open with everybody. That came over to us. We did talk for a bit about getting the message out there, and agreed that it was an extremely difficult thing to do. Not quite sure how we can improve on what we're doing. Anybody else from the group want to add anything? Something I've missed because I didn't take notes.
I think that we thought that he'd raised the profile of the church. We don't know how many, how it's actually going in, but he has raised the profile of the Catholic Church, and I think more bishops and priests and bishops and cardinals, people in authority in the church, are speaking up now than has happened for much of the time in the past. I think certainly my feeling was that a huge disappointment over many years in the absence of any strong voice from the church. So he has raised that profile, and I was thinking of the contrast with the bishop when I was young, the Pope rather, when I was young, who was the prisoner of the Vatican, and who, wasn't known, didn't speak. It didn't seem to me to be speaking out at all, and sheltered within the Vatican for good reasons, I suppose. But the contrast, Pope Francis is out with people all the time, and he even earned he's earned a number of articles of praise in unexpected places. In The Guardian, for example, they've spoken very highly of Pope Francis' influence and of many of the things that he has said, which must be worth something when even hostile, an anti-Catholic newspaper in many ways speaks with high praise of him.
I think I'm disappearing.
We can still see you, Joan, loud and clear.
Right. So should we go on to the next group then? There must be one group. Aisling, can you find out who was in that group?
Yes, I think it was Foster, Catherine, and Sheila.
Can I just say a couple of things that came out in our discussion? Was the how inspirational seeing the Pope in so many different encounters, and always so natural, even though clearly there'd been a lot of preparation. But where do we find the energy in our own lives? Is the challenge. Also, I mean, we saw the encounters in quick succession. They were the visible signs, but just how much had happened below ground, as it were, in preparation. which would have needed so much patience and perseverance and imagination. And then also what happened afterwards, so that the bridge that had been there as a real moment, but could be developed and really grow. So that when it came to how to share it more, it would be good to be able to find out more about the experiences of some of our partners in Pax Christi around the world, so that we could get to know and understand their ways of working, the challenge, the difficulties, and in the same way as there's close links with groups in Palestine, Israel. But perhaps that would be helpful for ourselves, so that we could grow in our appreciation of nonviolence, and then be better able to communicate it to others. I think if I haven't been clear enough there, but perhaps the others would like to chip in.
Thank you, Sheila.
I think, Sheila, you've said everything. Just one bit. While all the slides were very affirming, there was one slide which was Pope addressing the UN,
Oh, of
and
course.
there he adds 3 names as pillars of nonviolence. Maybe I get the wording wrong. And he mentions Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King, and Thomas Merton. I'm disappointed not to find Gandhi's name there. And I would expect my Pope to talk about Gandhi.
Thanks, Foster. So we've heard from the 5 groups now. Is there anything else that that's been a great richness, I think? And there are some practical things that maybe we'll all take away. And I mean, just Sheila's thought about looking at other the experiences of Pax Christi partners in other parts of the world sounds something we can practically follow up. All sorts of appeals for stories from Ellen, for me to put out there in the media. We've been encouraged. We've really had our thoughts about Pope Francis, and seen the wealth of that all he's done in that non-violence context, which we might have not put it in before. Lots to keep hold of, really, and maybe each one of us will have something to take away from that. But is there anything else that somebody feels needs to be said at this point before we move on to the next bit of this evening? Okay, thank you. We'll move on.
Thanks, Andrew. If we can have that next slide, and we'll just move into the action slot. Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, if I could just ask for a bit of patience, my screen.
No. No, next one. Brilliant. There we are. Thanks, Andrew. I don't know why my photograph's not coming up, or is it on the screen? Doesn't matter. Anyway, part of the purpose of bringing this kind of meeting together this evening, this gathering, is that we're at the beginning of these days of non-violence that run from the 21st of September until the 2nd of October. And those of you who are all deeply involved in peace and justice, you know it coincides with the season of creation, it coincides with the week of prayer for peace in Palestine and Israel. But I think these things are not in conflict with one another. So on the Pax Christi website, on the Nonviolence Days of Action page, all these resources are there, links to them all are there. And I just wanted to highlight them. The first one relates to that comment that Sheila made. How do we learn more about what our partners are doing? So we contacted 5 of our partners, the Sudan Council of Churches, the South Sudan Council of Churches, Pax Christi Germany, in Peru, the group called Duma, which is a group that's working on indigenous rights and extractive issues. In the Philippines, we've chosen Miriam College and their fantastic Peace Studies department. And in Mexico, we've chosen Serpaz Mexico, that's doing amazing community building work on disappearances, drug-related crime, but with community-based groups. And we thought it would be a good opportunity, you know, to put their websites, learn a little bit about them, go on, look at the website, look at their photographs, look at their projects. But more importantly, then just pop them an email of support and solidarity, because I don't think we're very good at knitting ourselves together and acknowledging the work, you know, that's being done by people like ourselves, but in other countries, other parts of the world. So sending solidarity messages, if we want to go in, look at those groups, what they're doing, and then just pop an email to the person we've mentioned and say, you know, great, keep going, fantastic to learn about you. I'm part of Pax Christi England and Wales, whatever you'd like to say. The second thing is to find some time in these days, yourself individually or in your family or with groups. In April, the Pope made a fantastic little video, only very short, very sweet, on what a culture of non-violence is about. And again, we put the link to that there. And that would be just a nice meditation to use yourself or to share with others on what a culture of non-violence looks like. If you're techie and you've got a phone and you can make your own photographs or videos, we would just love to gather some comments. We'd love to gather some of you maybe making the prayer of non-violence together. So sending us your own resources, because we need to build up banks of resources. So a video message, a group saying the prayer of non-violence together, a group making maybe a visual image together, because we've seen in that video tonight the power of the visual. And then every day, it started today, but going on till the 2nd, Catholic Non-Violence Initiative, and then Pax Christi England and Wales will repost it. There'll be something on Facebook and Twitter every day, a call to action, a call to prayer, something that we can do every day during these days. And then on the 2nd of October, which is International Day of Non-Violence, the idea is that we're inviting individuals and groups around the world to look at that vow of non-violence. It's on the website. We've got it in 7 languages. And maybe to use it as a personal reflection, you know, a kind of examination of conscience, a reflection on how your own work for peace is going, or make it and share it as a family. And we've also put online a service that could be used with a group or a church in order to just lay the groundwork for making that prayer of non-violence together. And then finally, many of you will be familiar with that image of the non-violent Jesus It's a Pax Christi prayer card. And these days in your churches or with friends, why not order a few and give them out to people and say, you know, I'm doing something this week because it's the Nonviolent Days of Action. What does this image say to you? What does this prayer say to you? And just a way of offering and sharing that more widely. So all of those are on the Pax Christi website, and more things can be ordered from the office. And we did actually produce a leaflet that went out in the mailing before last with all of these ideas and more things on it. So we're not asking people to kind of turn their lives upside down in the next week, but to take 1 or 2 actions that might put you in solidarity with others, put you in contact with others, make you feel part of a wider community of people who are, as I said much earlier on, we are the living out of an encyclical on non-violence. We're living it, we're doing it. We don't need to wait to be led. Thank you, Andrew.
So let's unmute ourselves and say this prayer together. Pour out on us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty.
Fill
Fill
us
us
with
with peace,
that we may live.
that we may live as brothers
and
and sisters,
harming no one.
harming no one,
bring
bringing
Healing
healing
to our
to
lives,
our lives,
that
that
we
we may protect the world and not prey
on it.
that
that
we
we may sow beauty,
not
not
pollution
pollution
and
and
destruction.
Touch
the hearts of those who look again, spend for the poor and the earth.
encourage
Encourage us to pray
We pray
for justice, love and peace.
peace. Amen. Thank you.
I guess, should I say thank you to everybody? Pat and
there's a final image.
Sorry.
Just with
I've failed.
no, don't worry. We've lost it.
No, we're back. I can get it back. There we are.
Yeah. Great. Valerie's just ready.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, we are.
So this is just to give you all the different web addresses. The first one is the International Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, and there is masses of material there and stories of grassroots groups around the world. The second, as you can see, is our own Pax Christi England and Wales website, and the resources are there for the different actions that Pat just mentioned, such as writing to the 5 partner organisations, which seems to me very accessible and attractive as something we can do individually or with our parish groups. And the third is resources that you can order from Pax Christi. So those are the 3 websites that we wanted to draw to your attention. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Valerie. So yeah, apologies, we've run on a bit. Just say Ashling's just put those website links in the chat if you wanted to go there and get on those and save them. But so yeah, we'll come to the end of the evening. Can I say thanks to everybody for coming along? It's been really great for to see you all. Can I just say personal thanks to Pat, Valerie and Joan for putting the evening together, having the idea and getting us to this point of what they put into it. and also for Aisling for handling the technicalities of the evening seamlessly and quietly in the background there. So yeah, thanks everybody, and I hope you have a really good rest of the evening and rest of the week, and as we go into the rest of these non-violence days of action. And we will see you again soon, no doubt.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.